some reason.
Be happy I just held my mouth on that one.
All right, Congressman McCotter, I go to you. You know, some guy, there was a guy earlier on Fox News who said it's great that this guy's being treated like a common criminal because it begins a bargaining process so that by figuring out what he's going to get for punishment, we'll get stuff out of him. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't, Greg. This is part of the trouble of treating the war for freedom against terrorism as a criminal matter rather than as a martial matter. In fact, I would argue with the person from Fox that was on there as a commentator that his presumption that this individual is sane is belied by the fact that he put an exploding device around his groin and tried to achieve martyrdom by blowing himself up.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be the best person to try to negotiate a reasonable understanding with. The reality is these people are intent on killing us. They will go to any lengths to do it. It is a martial matter, not a criminal matter, and this has set back our ability to preempt terrorism at its source rather than trying to catch them at the final step, which would be the security gate.
You know, a martial matter.
Between ass and Les, what a dope.
Last question to Congressman. Do you think it's possible that that President Obama could admit that he was wrong about these trials and also wrong about Gitmo and think maybe he underestimated this threat?
Well, I think that would be difficult for them to do. They've always taken the position as a matter of principle that this is a criminal matter, that it can be managed and controlled through the use of law enforcement, through the use of overseas operations. I think that has continually been belied by the nature and the actions of our enemy, and to continue from this false premise is going to continue to jeopardize American national security and the national security of our allies. Again, Greg, let's be clear, as SC said, we are already at war with these individuals. We have active military theaters of operation engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. Obviously, Iraq is going better at the present time. We also have to use every means at our disposal through the intelligence gathering and through regular traditional first responders and law enforcement to defend the homeland security of the United States. But we have to operate from the premise that these people are a martial threat. They want to kill us. That is their aim. They are not simply common criminals that should have the same type of constitutional rights or civilian criminal trials as anyone else in the United States.
There you go. All right. He said everything I wanted to say, but with complete sentences.
Yeah. And let's spitting.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, you should start spitting more like
hats that I was wearing now.
So you don't know?
No.
All right, Congressman. A lot of people say these new measures cast what do you call it? A
pall?
A pall. No, what do you call those nets? You cast a net too wide, a fishing net. Do you agree?
Well, first, Greg, I want to know if the soundtrack to the docudrama is available. It was most enchanting.
Yes.
And secondly, I can't believe that anybody in law enforcement at any level would consider Bill a person who is not of interest to them. Second, thirdly, I think that what we have to go back to is, again, the TSA is under enormous pressure. They're a lot like offensive linemen. They do their job day in, day out, but you only notice them when they make a mistake. And so there's an enormous amount of pressure on them. What we have to do is continue to take the attack to the enemy, to continue to try to preempt this long before the security checkpoint at the airport is our last line of defense.
Yeah. Well, you know, hey, Congressman, where do you stand on the dolphin as superior argument? And bear in mind that dolphins cannot vote in any election.
Well, we've seen instances in the European Union where they've tried to give quote-unquote non-person personhood to primates. This is what happens when radical secular and atheists come forward and try to divorce from human existence the reality that we have the spark of the divine within us and we are transcendent beings with dominion and stewardship over the creatures of the earth. When you reduce us simply down to the state of animal, what you see are people who try to ascribe and to grant the very same rights that we have unto animals. It's absolutely insane. And I think that this is just further evidence that radical secularism and atheism is going to continue to cause such types of problems if you subscribe to the illogic of it.
Yeah. Still, though, dolphins are cute.
Well, here's what I've learned about in my trip to Thailand.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, Congressman, but some mature response here is needed. It is kind of, is it child abuse to put words like that in a kid's mouth?
I have a 12-year-old daughter, and my wife and I spend all of our time making sure that words like that don't enter our daughter's mouth.
Yeah.
And what you see now out of Hollywood is that they are reveling in the corruption of innocence. They believe that this is something that is entertaining, let alone for some of them amusing. And I think they're going to be shocked by the reaction of sane Americans that they don't find this entertaining or amusing at all.
Yeah. Well, you're
out.
Yep. Congressman, you think this guy should be tried in a martial court and that treating this as a criminal, in that by treating this as a criminal matter, the Obama administration is putting America in danger. But the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, was tried as a civilian under the Bush administration, was he not?
Yes, he was. And how's that working out now that we have another attempted suicide bomber on a plane? Again, we have to go back to the concept of stopping this at its source and trying to follow the trail back rather than simply letting, as what's happened in this case, the guy gets lawyered up, probably at taxpayer expense, and he gets to sit there while this type of conspiracy to blow up Americans and other innocent civilians on planes continues.
So I've changed your mind.
No.
Jamie, a couple of my buddies.
Don't mess with Texas.
Yeah, you don't.
Congressman, you said the TSA is under an enormous amount of pressure, but don't you sometimes feel like the TSA was created by IRS employees to make themselves not look so bad?
No, I think, again, Andy, in all seriousness, they have a very difficult job. Again, you don't want to be that person that makes the mistake that winds up getting innocent people killed and having yourself put forward in the public and excoriated. And every day it's a daily battle for them to try to implement the rules that are put there in place by the administration and by Congress to try to protect the public from these types of instances. So I really have the utmost respect for them.
But let's be honest, some of the rules are stupid.
The problem is, and we can go back to your original question, which was not stupid, but when we go back to trying to get ahead of the curve rather than be reactive to what the terrorists have done is the problem. We want to get to the point where we're ahead of the curve, stopping it at its source before we try to use the checkpoints as the last line of defense.
Right. Okay. Quickly, Congressman, the story about the dolphins has nothing to do with atheism or radical secular humanism. Please stop profiling non-believers. And
well, Andy, actually it kind of does when you think about the fact that if we're all animals, what separates us from other animals?
Yeah, that's
and then
not at all.
You start getting into the question of intelligence. Now, if you want to talk about dolphins, I'll talk about dolphins and mammal-on-mammal contact. If you want to do that, I don't necessarily agree with that
that's
sort
Bill's
of stuff.
area of expertise.
What? For me and my friends, just share needles with me, Greg.
Congressman McCotter, the real outrage here, I think, is that it costs the taxpayers $32,000. Crazy.
Well, I think, Greg, what we're seeing is when you start to put out pamphlets like this, you're saying that the act, while it may be bad, is still somehow permissible because this is coming from an authority. Secondly, who's going to get their hands on this type of book to make sure that they don't put it to an ill use? And finally, in terms of Jim's comment, you cannot use heroin moderately. Ask Keith Richards.
Hey, Etsy.
Expecting it. I didn't think it made for polite television.
Congressman, this is one of the tough issues I'm sure that you faced in most of your political career. Whose side are you taking on this one? And will you be discussing it in front of Congress on Monday next week?
On the latter point, no. But on point A, I would have to side with Ms. Griffith. I think that it's unfair to her for him to sandbag her like that. In the future, I would just advise her to imagine there's no Twitter. It's easy if you try.
Very good. Bill, we have producers